Hey guys, Shanna Cramer here, Creatively Uncorked. Have you ever painted with gouache? I just got this brand new set yesterday, so I'm pretty excited. I haven't used gouache in well, it's since the late 90s actually. So gouache, basically, in case you haven't heard of it before or haven't worked with it before, is a water-based opaque watercolor. So what that means is it's not acrylic. Acrylic, when it dries permanently. Watercolor, when it dries, doesn't dry permanently. You can re-wet watercolors and keep continuing to work with them. And they're typically very transparent and typically used with a lot of water. Gouache, on the other hand, is opaque. It's meant to be used a little bit thicker, so you use it more like the consistency of similar to acrylic. But the difference is you can re-wet gouache and you can keep working with it once it's dry. You can also layer it. You can layer color over color because it's opaque. So there are a few things that I want to test with this because it's been a lot of years since I've used gouache. So what I'm going to do is right there in the corner. So that painting right here is the one that I want to try to use with this gouache because this is a 12 color set. So I want to be able to use all of these colors, and I think this is a pretty good painting to be able to do that with. So I'm going to test these out. A few things that I'm curious about are how thin can I mix it with water? Can it be used similar to a watercolor? Can it be that thin? How thick can I work with it? Can I paint impasto like I could with acrylic? And another thing is, can I mix this with watercolor? So back in the day when I actually did use gouache, that was something that we did. We only had a few colors and then we just mixed it with watercolor to get a broader range of colors. So this one, I've already got 12 colors here, so I probably don't need to mix anything else, but I'm going to just to see. So, all right, let's get started. All right, so here we are. I've got my colors, and on this particular painting, I'm going to start with the background. And let's see here. First, I just want to take a look at this set. So I've got 2 different reds, 2 yellows, 2 greens, 2 blues, a purple, brown, black, and a white. Traditionally, well, if you paint with watercolor ever, you probably, depending on who your teacher is, you know, if they let you use opaque or not. A lot of watercolor painters are very traditionalist, and they will only use transparent watercolors. And even if you are competing, if you're putting your work in a show, you might not be allowed to use any opaques, and then the opaque would be the gouache, for example. So a lot of watercolor teachers will have you do your painting and then add a little touch of white gouache at the end just to you know, just to bring back some of your highlights. I do it kind of a lot. Nah, just sometimes. So that they call this turquoise blue. It looks cerulean blue. Let's see, this would be ultramarine deep, so standard color there. All right, and this is going to be my sky, and I do want to take some white here. So anyway, like I was saying, one of the more common colors is going to be white. So any typical watercolor may probably have white gouache in their watercolor set or somewhere nearby that they would use. Okay, so what I'm using here for paper, this is actually watercolor paper. Gouache and watercolor are similar. So what I'm using is watercolor paper. This is 300-pound hot press, and it's gessoed on one side. So I want to try painting on this side, and then I'm probably going to try flipping it over and painting on the other side, because this 300-pound hot press is a very absorbent paper. It just sucks up the water really quickly. So I'm kind of curious how it's going to handle the 2 different surfaces. So that is another thing we're going to be able to test here. Okay, so I'm just going to take some of my blues here. First thing I'm going to try is painting very thin. And that's not working, I believe, because of this surface. So let's go ahead and just work thickly like we would with acrylic. This is just going to be my light sky color. There's a guy on YouTube who paints always with gouache. That's what he does. James Gurney, if you ever look him up, he is a very realistic painter or illustrator. I guess he had a career as an illustrator. Don't know a whole lot about him, but he does some pretty amazing videos. So, and actually that's kind of what inspired me to try out gouache. I think the reason that he used gouache and the reason that I used gouache years ago is because it's kind of an illustrator's medium. It's something that, because it dries very quickly, I mean it's dry like very quickly, you can paint over it in a very short amount of time. You can color correct easily because of the opaqueness, the opacity of it. It should cover whatever is underneath it. This stuff, I'm not really sure how light fast this is. This is not, I mean, this is Holbein, which is a pretty good brand, I think, but I don't know how light fast this is. And if you're a professional artist and you're creating fine art that you expect to be around for years and years, then light fastness matters. If your color is not light fast, it will fade. So purples, typically reds, are very common for them if you have a painting hanging, especially if you put it near a window where it's being hit by sunlight. Those colors will fade to nothing in a short time. Some of Van Gogh's paintings, actually, he did paintings of red tulips that now are white tulips. The red has completely faded from them. But if you're an illustrator, it doesn't matter, because your painting then only needs to last long enough to make it to the camera. You take a picture of an illustration and then you use it in printing or now these days on the web, but that's it. That's all the longer your paint needs to last. So you don't really care about light fastness, so I'm not sure how light fast these colors would be. All right, so I have my background there. I'm going to add my mountain. So I'm just going to take these two blues, make them a little bit darker. And I'm using up that white pretty fast. Okay. You know, once I got that first layer down, now this paint is sticking to the surface just fine. I'm not noticing any trouble. So the paint sticks to itself pretty well. Okay. Now I think I do need it to dry